Welcome back to Life's Chillin'. My name is Avital, and this week's Parshat is Parshat Vayeitzei. At the end of last week's Parsha, we saw Jacob, who had to flee from his brother Esau, who wanted to kill him. If you want a recap of that story, you can check out my video from last week where I talked about the entire situation. But essentially, Jacob had to leave quickly, and he wasn't able to take any of the wealth he had amassed, any of his sort of servants, nothing with him. He just had to pick up and leave on his own. And he goes to the land at his parents' instructions. He goes to Haran, which is where his mother's brother, so his uncle, Laban, was living. On the way to Haran, he stops at a well, and who does he encounter? He encounters Rachel, who is the daughter of Laban. So, of course, he's very excited and happy to see her because that's really who he came for. He came to go to Laban's house. And so they go to Laban's house together, and Jacob stays with them, and he works for Laban for a month. Before they have this conversation where Laban tells Jacob, he says, just because, you are sort of family doesn't mean that you should work for free. I should pay you something. And so Jacob decides to set his wages, and he says, I will work for you for 7 years, and in return, I want to be able to marry Rachel. So why does he say he's going to work for 7 years in order to marry Rachel? So the commentators say that because Jacob came empty-handed, he didn't have anything to offer to his bride, nothing to give her or her family as gifts, and he also didn't really have a way to provide for his bride. He really had left his homeland with nothing. And so him and Laban, they agree he's going to work for 7 years, and at the end of 7 years, he'll marry Rachel. So Jacob puts in his time. He does all of the things he says he's going to do. And as the story famously goes, it's the wedding day, it's finally here. He's going to marry Rachel. And Laban came up with this plot where he switched the brides. So it was actually Rachel's older sister, Leah, who ends up marrying Jacob. Now, how did that exactly happen? It seems to be that she was covered with a thick veil, like brides often wear veils now, so he didn't know it was her. And so when he wakes up in the morning, he's very surprised to see that it's Leah and not Rachel, who he had worked for, and he's obviously upset. So he goes back to Laban, and he says, what is this? What happened here? And they end up coming to the agreement that Jacob is going to work for 7 more years in order to be able to marry Rachel in addition to Leah. And so that's quite a setback. He worked a really long and hard time in order to marry Rachel, and now he's being said that he's got to double that time in order to end up with her. And that's not the only sort of thing that took longer than Jacob had thought. As we read later in the Parsha, once he finally is able to marry Rachel, they are not able to have children. Now, while Jacob and Leah have children, and Jacob has children with the maidservant of Leah and the maidservant of Rachel, Rachel is barren. She's not able to have children. And it takes till the point where collectively Jacob has 10 children before Rachel has her first child. So it took a very, very long time. And it was really a sort of point of contention within their family unit because nobody was really satisfied. Rachel had this longing and this desire for children, and she didn't feel satisfied without being a mother. Leah felt like her husband loved her sister more than he loved her. Jacob, is trying to make everybody happy best he can, but he can't provide a child for Rachel if God's not going to make that happen. And so everybody is sort of not at rest until they finally have children. And so what we can learn from these stories is that it's a lot of times our goals are going to take a long time. They're going to require a lot of hard work, but they're going to be worth the wait. For Jacob, again, he set out thinking it was just going to be 7 years before he married Rachel, which is no small amount of time, and it ended up being 14 years. And in our own life, we're going to have these goals, and we're going to have these ideas in our head of how things should work, and how long they should take, and these timelines for ourselves. But it's really out of our control. Let's take a modern example. Let's say you are waiting you're expecting to get a promotion, and you think you've put in the hard work and it's about the right timeline, and you should be getting a promotion right now. And you don't end up getting that promotion for another 2 or 3 years, or somebody else gets the position and so it pushes you off another several years. You're going to be disappointed, but you have two choices. You can give up on the goal, on the dream of getting that promotion, or you can keep working hard and keep on going and trying to find positive and good things along the way until you finally get that promotion one day. And when you finally do get that promotion, it's going to be so sweet, and you're going to say it was worth the wait, and I worked so hard, and I worked even harder than I thought I'd have to work to get there. And as we see for Jacob, while he had difficulties, while he encountered stumbling blocks, roadblocks along the way, they were positive things for him as well. They were things that made him grow as a person. You can look at Leah as an example, and you could say either that was a 7-year setback, or wow, look at how much that enriched his life that he wouldn't have had without those additional 7 years. Because he not only gained a wife and a life partner, but Leah gave him 6 children, 6 sons, and a daughter as well. And so together, they had all of these children that he wouldn't have had otherwise. And so it brought him all of these good things. We see later in the Parsha that Jacob actually stayed in another 6 years with Laban doing work for him. And he became so successful. He really flourished financially because he was a great herdsman who worked really well with the flock and amassed a great amount of wealth so that when he finally left, he left with a fortune. And so, again, he wouldn't have had that opportunity if he hadn't stayed and made his stay with Laban longer. And so, going back to ourselves, in our lives, we will set goals, we will have ideas of how they should go and how long they're going to take, and most of the time they're going to take longer than we think. But they're worth the wait, and we have to remember to persist and to keep going just like Jacob did. And now in the end, we will be able to enjoy this very sweet reward for not having given up. So I hope you all have a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.